So is Liam Neeson's new film Memory something to remember or something to forget? Let's find out now. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch Your Pass, and today I'm going to talk about Memory, which is a new Liam Neeson film that comes to theaters on April 29th, 2022. In it, Neeson plays someone with a lot of very interesting skills who has to get the job done, kill a bunch of bad guys. You know the plot, you know the story. It's a Neeson film. So the twist here, though, is that his memory is starting to fail. So where he once was this very precise super assassin who would had a reputation for going in and going out and no one's seen, now he has to kind of take some steps to alleviate that. So occasionally he'll write things on his hand to remember what he has to do, or he'll have to look at the pictures of his targets over time to make sure he knows what he's doing. And occasionally he'll wake up a little confused, or he'll maybe not be certain if he took an action or didn't. That's kind of the main plot of this story. He gets into a job that he doesn't want to complete, and so has to then fight his way out. Again, it's a Neeson movie. You know the plot. So my hot take on this is I actually think you should pass it. It's kind of in the between like a rental and a pass. I like some aspects of it. I like the mystery, and I like that Neeson in this one plays more on the bad guy spectrum. He still is kind of a bad guy with a heart of gold, but he still plays more of a bad person. But the story just didn't really connect to me. The memory aspect of it that I thought could be really intriguing didn't really come up enough. And at times it did feel like just kind of your generic police procedural. So I think it's ultimately a pass. It may be a pass rental, depends on how much you like Neeson films. But I'm gonna go a little bit more into the film, talk about the things I like, things I didn't like, and then go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers. I'm gonna try to keep the spoilers to the ending part, at least the main spoilers. So if you don't want to know what happens in the film, turn it off at the ending. You might find out a few small things because I gotta talk about the plot, but I'm gonna try to keep it mostly vague. Maybe you won't remember them by the time you watch it. Who knows? So in Memory, like I said, you have Neeson playing this super assassin, Alex Lewis, who is known for precision. And he gets a job that he refuses to complete. And then, because he refused to complete this, he has to hunt down his employers and take them out as well. Now, the problem here is that he is also being hunted because he started the job by the FBI and the local police. So then they're trying to stop a killer before he hires again. And then you also have a little bit of intrigue and maybe corruption in the police forces. But Neeson has to kind of work quickly, stay one step ahead, but he has this kind of extra problem of his memory begins to falter. So occasionally he'll forget what he's doing, or he'll maybe forget to take a step that he really should have taken. And that kind of puts a little X factor into this overall story. So things I liked about this movie. So the first thing I liked is the mystery. The movie doesn't reveal a ton at the start and kind of trickles it throughout the film. You get some reveals of the characters, some backstory, and you get some reveals of kind of Neeson's ultimate background and things that he had to go through. So it's kind of a normal thriller type film in this genre, but it was nicely done. They kind of trickled things here and there that at least kept the story moving along, gave you a few surprises as the film goes on. Second thing I liked is they had kind of two main intertwining storylines that tied together decently well. You had the main one of Alex Lewis, the assassin, trying to take out the people, and then you had the FBI agent, Vincent Serra, played by Pearce, who is trying to hunt him down and stop him, but is maybe a little sympathetic to some of the things that he's doing once he starts kind of understanding more about Alex Lewis. And so those two storylines intertwining do have a fun little cat and mouse aspect to it. You're trying to see if Alex Lewis and Liam Neeson can stay one step ahead of the FBI, even though he has a memory that's faltering and he's getting old and things like that. So you do have this kind of nice intertwining plot. The third thing I liked is Liam Neeson as a bad guy. I mean, it was a kind of fun to see him as a bad person and kind of acknowledging he's a bad person. He still is kind of like a bad guy with, I'll say, like a heart of silver, because he has a code and there's things that he's not going to do. But I think normally Neeson plays like the good guy who is forced to do bad things. This one, he's like the bad guy who is forced to do good-ish, bad-ish things. So it was a nice change there. And the last thing I liked is the ending. I thought the ending actually had this fun little twist on it that you could tell what was happening. Like, I actually wrote in my notes, like, I think this is what they're doing, but it was still a nice little surprise at the end. So things I didn't like about this film. The first is, it felt, I'm going to say a little corny. It felt like a police procedural, like a television police procedural at times. It wasn't super involved. It wasn't super deep. Did have a darker tone than I think what you would see on television, but overall it didn't feel like the story and the gravity of the situation was really emphasized like it should have. Like, this dealt with some pretty serious subject matter, And aside from maybe like some expressions of the actors, the story didn't feel like it had that kind of weight that it should have, given what it's kind of exploring. And the second thing I didn't love is, I'm going to say, the memory parts, because this film has an interesting concept, right? Liam Neeson is an assassin whose memory is failing, and that could have been brought up in different ways, but it does feel like it's just kind of almost superficially brought up. There's occasions when it affects things in the story, but for the most part, he seems to be a fairly capable assassin, except for a few things he has to take into account. And so the memory side of it didn't really affect him as much as I was expecting. Like there was one scene where you're like, oh my gosh, you do that and you can't really remember, which I thought was interesting. And there's occasionally times when he'll like wake up a little confused, but those tend to pass. And overall, like it feels like the namesake of this film doesn't really come to fruition. And that's really interesting, because you have this scenario where Alex Lewis is losing his memory and has to kind of take steps to remember them. And he wrote things on his arm, and that kind of instantly made me think of Memento, which stars Guy Pearce. You have Guy Pearce in this film, but Memento did it so much better. Such a different, intriguing story. This one, it feels almost like that memory stuff is just added on to give the story just a little bit of a different angle, but not enough to really make it an intriguing aspect of the story. And the last thing I didn't love is just the plot. It felt a little too complicated given what was happening. I mean, it's basically just Neeson going through and killing people, but they added some intrigue and corruption that didn't really feel necessary. And also, it feels like a lot of Neeson movies I've already seen. Now, look, it's a Neeson movie, you know what is going to kind of happen, but there were multiple parts when I was watching this where I was like, I think I've seen this movie before. Oh, it's a job that he can't complete. Oh, like now he has to kind of prove that he's a good guy to the cops and things. It has a lot of aspects that feel maybe recycled. Maybe it's just this genre, but overall, it didn't really feel like the plot had enough uniqueness to really stand out. It wasn't memorable enough. So now going into the ending, and you know what? There will be spoilers. It's the ending. There will be spoilers. If you don't want to know what happens in the film, turn this off now. I'm going to go into things that happen and kind of the big reveals in the story. So, like I said, Neeson plays Alex Lewis, who's an assassin who's forced to take out this, I guess, snitch who recorded a threat that the main crime boss in this area said to him. So Neeson goes in and takes out the first target. And then he's flipping through, and one of those targets he has to take out is this kid. And so he kind of, I don't think he realizes that she's a kid, because he kind of goes to do the job. And she was actually she was the daughter of another criminal in this film, and that person trafficked her. So she was both a witness to the crimes and someone that possibly could have brought down this criminal enterprise, which is also, like, I think she's a 13-year-old kid, so she's still a kid even though she had this horrible experience. So Alex Lewis goes in, and to complete the job, for some reason, like, he gets there, which is weird because I think he should have known that she was a kid before that. Maybe he didn't realize that. He gets into the room, has a gun pointed to her face. She wakes up and she's like, I didn't say anything. And then that's like the moment that he's like, I can't do this, which again is really weird because he's there. Like he went to go do the job and then says like, okay, I can't do this. But I'm glad he didn't do it, right? I'm glad he has some morals. So in response to this job he can't do, he attacks his employer and says, call the contract off. And he's like, I can't do that. And so then, the consequence of that is he has to go through and murder everyone involved in the contract, starting with the person who immediately gave it to him, and then he has to work his way up. He has some information because, remember, the first person on the contract had some threat from the main boss. So he knows who the main boss is, and I guess he's going to work his way up. And this is also when we find out that the main boss, the crime lord of this city, I think it's El Paso, Texas, is Monica Bellucci. She plays Davana, who is this real estate mogul, businesswoman, super successful, but she apparently either built her empire on crime or at least has aspects of her business involving crime and uses that to then also bribe the police and bribe local officials. And she kind of seems to have everyone on her payroll, even though they don't directly show a lot of it. It seems like everyone is influenced by her. So, like I said, there are two main storylines. Now you have Alex Lewis trying to end his contract and take out everyone who might come after him. You also have FBI agent played by Guy Pearce trying to figure out, it seems like there's some sort of mole, feeding information to the cartel, to this criminal underground. And the FBI is trying to figure it out. But as soon as they get kind of close to trying to figure it out, the operation is called off. You're like, huh, that's weird. You think that they would want to figure that out, but like, oh no, you have no results and this is too costly. We're going to call it off. So it seems like maybe there's some local police pressure. They don't want the FBI to like go into this. So those are the two main threads. And then now when you have Alex Lewis taking out some of the crime figures in this area, the FBI starts investigating that, and they kind of continue the investigation even though they're not getting support from the local police. They kind of go rogue-ish, but I mean, they're the FBI, they have separate jurisdiction anyways, but they kind of go rogue and try to hunt down Alex Lewis. But they also start to, I think, sympathize with him because he's taking out bad guys, and so they're like, well, he's taking out bad guys, so we should probably stop him, but yeah, he seems like maybe he's taking out bad guys. So there you go. That's the two main threads. So one problem with Alex Lewis as he's taking out people is he never wears a mask, which I thought was pretty weird because he takes out some people in some very public places. You'd think there would at least be a security camera. Apparently this city doesn't have security cameras, but he starts taking out people involved in the plot. First he threatens the employer. That employer calls a contract on him. He takes out that assassin. He then takes out that employer, who's this guy in glasses. He's at a gym and he's like running on a treadmill, and Neeson just kind of like walks up with a hooded jacket on, shoots him in the face, and walks away. Again, he should probably be wearing a mask or something because he definitely kills some people in a very public area. But you know what? He's a professional. Maybe he knows what the cameras are. Now, eventually, he tracks down the son of Monica Bellucci, who seems to be kind of one of the main people involved in the criminal underground. So I think what actually happens is that she is a prominent businesswoman. Her son is involved in some really shady, disgusting things. And she kind of, I don't know, she doesn't participate in it, but I think she kind of uses the money to smooth that over, or to, at least keep him safe and allow him to partake in his horrible vices. And so when he finds out about the son, he's like, okay, well, that's not going to fly. So he takes out the son. That puts him on a direct warpath to Monica Bellucci. So she already took a hit out on him. So they already kind of know that they're going to fight. But now it's time for Neeson to take her out. And the film, like I said, feels sometimes like a weird NCIS, maybe like a good/bad NCIS episode. There's one scene where like they're trying to track down some more information. So they go to the wife of one of the people that was murdered, and the cop kind of like goes there alone at night, and she's clearly flirting with him. And she's like, well, what do you want, detective? And he's like, well, I'm not here to clean your pool, which is, again, really cringeworthy dialogue sometimes. Didn't really connect. And then there's one time where like Neeson gets shot and he has to cauterize the wound. And so he like pours alcohol on it and like lights it on fire, like lights the alcohol on fire to, I think, cauterize the wound, which I don't actually think will cauterize it. I don't know. Someone correct me. I feel like the alcohol would just kind of burn off and then maybe give you like a second or third degree burn, but wouldn't actually cauterize the wound. So Neeson and the cops are playing kind of like a cat and mouse game. And he's giving them a little bit more information, giving them information about this, underground operation. And they are finding a little bit more about him. He actually says his name, like he tells them his name, which I thought was weird, but I think he realizes that he's kind of, this is going to be a job that he is going to complete, but not get out alive. And so they find out who he is, and they find out that him and his brother were both kids who were abused by their dad. And they were kind of in and out of the ER. It feels like there was both physical and sexual abuse of them. And so that kind of is why Neeson, that's kind of why Alex has a code where he doesn't take out kids. It's like his one thing. Like he got into a lot of trouble. He got into a lot of violent fights and things like that, but he will not take out kids because of the abuse that he suffered as a kid. So I think when he realizes what's going on underlying this job, it triggers something in him, and he's not going to take out that child, and then B, that kind of triggers the abuse that he had when he was a kid, and it makes him want to like go up and take everyone out. Now, he didn't initially start taking people out. It wasn't until like they took a hit out on him that he then, I think, started to really fight back. But again, I think this all speaks to Neeson's character as this like Avenger who is going to take them down. So eventually, sorry, this is a little bit scattered. The movie's a little scattered. So you have Alex Lewis has taken out pretty much everyone involved except for the boss. And so she knows that he's coming for him. And so she hires a bunch of police officers to come and guard her. But Alex Lewis is a professional. He causes a distraction that gets the cops away. And then gets into her building. He like goes up to the roof and then uses like a window washer platform to get into her building. And while he's there, there's a few cops, and so he takes them out. But it's weird because he's using like an assault rifle and he shoots them, and I think they survive. Like they go down. I was like, oh my gosh, he's like killing cops. But then I think they all survive. But I mean, that must be some really good armor to survive like an assault rifle bullet. But hey, you know what? Maybe they have really, really good armor. Maybe she bought them really great armor. Who knows? But eventually he kind of incapacitates them. So corners Davana, played by Monica Bellucci, and has a gun to her head. And she says, "You killed my son." And he says, "Yes, and I know what you've done." And then he pulls the trigger. So he finally has her cornered, pulls the trigger, and nothing happens. And you're like, what? Like, he had everything there. And then you see a scene where the FBI agents are exploring his hideout. They find out that his hideout was underneath his family bakery. And so they go there, they find his hideout. It's kind of a mess. But one of the things they find is the firing pin for a gun. So it looks like when he took apart this gun, he did that in response to him accidentally, purposefully, but kind of unintentionally killing a cop. He took the gun apart, like disgusted with himself. And I guess when he put it back together, he forgot the firing pin. Maybe that's part of the memory thing. He just kind of like forgot to put it in. So he accidentally didn't put the firing pin in, and Davana is alive. He gets captured by the police, taken into custody. They beat him up. They really abuse him. But before this, Lewis had sent the evidence, at least 2 of the flash drives with evidence of the child abuse, to the FBI. So the FBI knew what was happening in, like, I guess Davana's organization, or at least her son's organization. But I guess he didn't send the last piece of evidence, and so the FBI needs that information from him to get the last piece of evidence to make the case. He told the FBI that he had a recording of the threat, but he never told them where it was, which is weird because he'd already given them all the other information. He should have just given them the threat. Like, hey, I'm sending you a package with 3 flash drives rather than 2, and you're going to have all the information, and now you don't need me. Again, it was weird. It allows for them to have this like aha moment. So the FBI fights with the local police to get him transferred to a hospital and to get him under FBI custody. So Davana tries to send a doctor, her own personal doctor, to this hospital to take him out, which again is really weird because this is like a celebrity doctor. He seems like he does only personal house calls. And she threatens him by saying, like, I know what you did. You also were involved in the things that my son were involved in, which seems like everyone here is probably corrupt. Like every person who's not the FBI or Liam Neeson is evil in this film. So she blackmails him, pays him to go try to kill Neeson. When he gets there, Liam Neeson, who's like essentially passed out, all of a sudden like wakes up and's like, no. He knows he's going to kill him and takes him hostage, takes the doctor hostage. Now, this obviously causes some issues, and the cops surround the hospital because a killer has a doctor hostage. They don't really know that the doctor went to try to kill him. So Neeson says, like, I'm only going to talk to the FBI. And he gets the FBI there. He goes out with like a blanket over his and the doctor's head, so they can't tell who's who. And while they're going out, the local police are like, oh, Alex Lewis is on the left. Take him out. And for some reason, like, I can't see his face. They just assume that that's him. And a sniper shoots and kills the person on the left, who actually ends up being the doctor. That person falls on the ground, and in the confusion, Neeson runs into the car with the FBI agent played by Pearce. So they have a conversation, and Neeson like has kind of a memory moment where he says something like, Barry is Bery, Barry. And he seems out of it. You don't really know what's going on. And then he essentially says, like, you know how this is going to end. This is not going to end well. And then he just opens the door and like walks out and just gets capped by the police. Like he just kind of walks out there and the police just shoot him, falls on the ground. I think, is this maybe like one of the only movies where Neeson has just died? Like normally he either lives, like in most of his movies, or it's implied, like, spoilers, The Gray, where kind of at the end he's fighting. You don't really know if he's going to survive, but he's probably not going to survive. This one, he just like straight up gets shot, falls on the ground, bleeds out, he's dead. So I guess the movie's over, right? No, there's more. So the FBI agents are kind of like looking over the evidence, taking down the case. Like, okay, well, this case is over, but they don't feel good about it because they didn't actually take down the boss. And then they're looking at some of the pictures and they see the bakery that Neeson grew up in, that Alex Lewis grew up in. And it's they see the name and they realize that like some of the letters are broken and the only letters that are up there are B-E-R-Y. So that like jogs memory of like, oh, Barry is B-E-R-Y. He must have been telling us this clue, which is a very obscure way to tell him this clue. Like I said, he probably should have just sent them this flash drive initially. But the FBI agent goes over there, breaks the glass, gets the flash drive out of the B. And again, he didn't need to break the glass. He could have just reached around because Neeson just dropped it in there. But he breaks the glass, gets the flash drive, finds the evidence, goes to the DA's like, hey, we got the evidence. And the DA's like, oh, well, that's not enough. You need Alex Lewis to testify. I'm like, wait, you said he wasn't a reliable witness. Why do we need him now? And like, well, sorry, that's what happens. So this basically makes the FBI agent think like, okay, everything is corrupt. Like, I can't trust any of these people. And his boss is like, agent, maybe you should take a break. Like, it seems like you're getting a little too close. Something along those lines. He's like, yeah, maybe I will. And so he goes and like takes a leave, disgusted with what's happening. So you then see him at his home making some food, kind of being on leave, and one of his partners shows up and she's like, hey, let's go for a drink. He's like, no, I'm not feeling. He's like, no, we're going for a drink now. And you're like, well, this is weird. Like, why would they need to go for a drink? So they go out drinking, and while they're drinking, you see Davana, Monica Bellucci, in her house, just kind of like drinking some wine. She doesn't look very happy, but at least she's alive. And then all of a sudden, yoink, like some masked person slits her throat. And so she bleeds out in her house, surrounded by her luxury and whatever, but alone. And then you see on the news, the guy Pearce and his partner see on the news that Davana was killed. So when they see that that person is that Davana is dead, she starts reciting this like Spanish phrase that one of the other members of the FBI team, this like Mexican agent who was on the team just for this investigation, had said. Like, he had these like Catholic pendants involving different saints, and he had this he one of them was like Saint Inez. And so she starts reciting this, and so you're like, okay, so we know that person probably took out Davana. And after she says this and we see that Davana's dead, Guy Pearce looks at her and is like, did you just create an alibi for me? And she's like, eh. And she also does some things where like she doesn't pay for the drinks. She's like, oh, I forgot my wallet, so he has to pay, which again is like, I think further cementing his alibi because they don't have a credit card transaction. It's kind of clever. I like that part. And then we see that agent, that Mexican agent, burning all of his clothes, like the things that he used to kill Davana, in a fire. And then the camera like pans up to the night sky, and boom, that's the movie. That is Memory. Like I said, it has some issues. You know, it's entertaining enough, and I liked, you know, some aspects of it, but overall I think it's probably a pass. Maybe a rental if you like Liam Neeson movies. But it's coming to theaters on April 29th, 2022, so you can check it out for yourself if you want to. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.